Hi there, and welcome to the Pod Pod, the Northwest's newest all-purpose recording studio for content creators. If you've got something to say and need a place to say it, search for podpod.uk. In all the usual social channels, give us a like and a follow, and get in touch to reserve your time to create. Today I was joined in the Pod Pod by Liz Douglas, owner of Roots and Branches Social Enterprise. We had a fascinating chat about her background, her first job, which was definitely not the job she thought it was going to be, the calling to a different path, and the incredible work she has delivered since then, working at the heart of some of the most socially challenged communities in the UK. Today, Roots and Branches has become a UK-wide rich resource, providing practical and proven guidance for anyone working closely with members of communities that face the toughest societal and economic challenges. So here we are at the Pod Pod at Magicalogical. It's not the first time you've been here, Liz. You've been in the studio before with Dave Baxter and a few of the people who've benefited from the training and teaching that you've given them. But for those who know very little about you, Liz, I wonder if you'd give me a bit of background about yourself and what you're about and what drives you and what interests you and stuff.
Yeah, so my name's Liz Douglas. I am the director of a social enterprise called Roots and Branches. But I always say my first job is being a mum of two gorgeous girls, Jennifer and Annabelle. Taught me so much in life. I think you can go to college for all your life, but you'll never learn as much as you do from your children. So my background professionally is construction. So I did 13 years in construction, which I loved, the machines and watching the earth move, etc.
When you say construction,
Yeah.
what side of construction? So in project management, on sites, or a mixture of
So I
both?
worked in plant hire. So the companies I worked for were, for example, Hewden and Stewart, Caterpillar, who rented out large items of plant, so the big diggers, your dumper trucks. Absolutely love playing all them, but my role was more on the sales side and the business development side. So I held, my role was to work with key account clients, so like the top 5 spenders or the top 10 spenders, and be able to maintain those relationships. But that meant spending a lot of time out on site, making sure the plant that we were putting out on site was in good order, which meant learning about the machines. That means I got to play on them.
What do you think of the construction industry during that period then, as a woman in construction?
Yeah, so back then, I think there was one other lady in construction within my field, and I fell into the role because when I finished college, I did business studies for 2 years. I went to the job centre, and there was a job working in administration in a plant company. So I turned up for my interview, thought I was going to be applying for a job selling plants.
Right. Okay.
And when I got there, and there were these big diggers and 25-ton dump trucks, I was like, I've come to the wrong place. I better check. And there was no mobile phones then, so I knocked on this door and I said, "Hi, I'm looking for Vibraplant." And they went, "Yeah, this is it." I was like, all right. So I had my interview, totally had to switch my narrative of what we're going to say about what I liked about plants.
So you were thinking on your feet then?
Thinking on my feet, and was interviewed by 2 guys who ended up having work relationships with them for about 10 years. We worked with different organisations within the plant hire industry together.
Yeah. So when you saw that job advert, I'm just intrigued now. So I've hired quite a number of plants in this room, and I can understand why that might be an industry that you thought existed, because it's probably an industry that we can make some money in. But plant hire, so then you get there and you got to think on your feet. You thinking out the box. You're trying to switch up your narrative to I suppose still get the job and all the rest of it. And when you walked out of there, had they offered you the job, or were you confident that it was yours? Or
I didn't have a clue. All I knew was that I had a good. I hadn't had many interviews. I was only 18. I hadn't had many interviews, but I knew that I got along well with who was the regional manager and the depot manager at the time. And yeah, when I got the call to say that I got the job, I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I was going selling plants, but I'm going working in the office of this. And it turned out to be the best thing that happened to me, like what I learnt in the 2 or 3 years I was with that organisation, the people I met. I worked with Patrick McGuinness. He worked there as well, so it was a really good place to work, and I started to learn. I think I've always had a bit of a where I come from, it's quite you play on the street, hard knock kind of life. So playing on these machines to me was like just playing out in the streets up Brightmead, where I come from. So playing on these machines and learning about them, and there was a barrier for females at the time. And I remember I was poached by another plant hire company and to do the same job in the offices in Preston. And there was a role that came available for area sales manager, and no one was really applying and met the needs. So I knew the job inside out. I knew the machines. I knew the clients because I dealt with them in the office on the phone. So I said to the manager, I want to apply for this job, and the answer was, no, women don't go this far.
Oh, really?
Which he didn't say it, and they didn't go that far. It was just a fact at the time.
Yep.
So I said to him, well, you've got to at least give me an interview, like for experience. Thank you. At least give me an interview for experience. So they went, all right then, if it'll keep you happy, it'll keep you quiet. So I went in and had my interview. And he came back and said, well, there's nobody else who could do the job, so we're going to take a risk. So that was like maybe a massive thing. And I got a company car, and I'll be honest, I smashed the role, and then I was poached by another organisation. And
so what were the biggest challenges in that role? So presumably in a sales role, you've got targets to meet.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that challenge in a job, actually being given targets, and it's all about relationships, I guess, isn't it? So tell me a bit about that.
I felt that I'd built some relationships with our clients on the phone over quite a few years, regardless of which plant hire company I work for. Not one construction company would use just one plant hire company. So wherever I went, there was a relationship, but I just improved that relationship with the company that I went. So for me to go out and meet them in person they were happy because I'd already had an online relationship with them. So going out to see them, it was ticking their box. I was building my skills and starting to travel around the country. The other barrier was like going on site, and people would either, back then you could wolf whistle and say sly comments and stuff like that, so I could give as much back. Like I say, where I come from, like, you stick up for yourself, so I could give as much back, and before we knew it, we had an equal respect. Yes. But the other thing was going on with my hard hat and my steel toe cap boots and my flip chart, usually, because I had to make notes on machines and make sure like they were all tested in certain things. People think I was health and safety, so it'd be like they're either wolf whistling or suddenly they've got the hard hats on and putting the health and safety equipment on, and then someone would go, it's all it is from such a place. So yeah, I did. I really loved it, and it was a big decision to leave an industry that I'd become really fond of, and probably had broken through some barriers for females as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing, isn't it? I suppose in some respects, being young, being confident, getting the job in the first place. You've no preconceived ideas, have you? No. So you've just gone in there and done what is you. It was purely on
relationships and working relationships. All the other comments I would have was, "Oh, how many people have you slept with to get to that point?" I was like, "None." I didn't realise that was part of the criteria. Did I have to sleep with somebody? Did I have to sleep with someone to be a manager in the construction industry? Did I have? And sadly, look, I could come back with these things. So yeah, I took it with a pinch of salt, really.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's credit to you, isn't it? In a situation where you were new to it, finding yourself in a male-dominated world, but knowing how to develop relationships that would benefit you and would benefit the company that you were representing, I guess. It's an interesting thing to have started off in, because obviously sales and relationships is a tough role, isn't it? But what it does is, I guess, it grounds you in how to then take yourself forward, represent yourself, and represent everything that you're about later on. So tell me about that. Tell me about that transition. Obviously, how long were you in construction?
I was in construction for 13 years.
13 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there was ever an industry I would go back to, it would still be construction.
Yeah.
For many different reasons, and like you said earlier, being sales led and target led, for me and my character, if someone's setting me a target, then I've got a goal to reach. Whereas suppose if I'm setting my own targets, I can procrastinate because I know I can move the target. So for me, having someone setting goals and me achieving them work for my leadership style. So being self-employed now is something that I don't have really anyone setting me targets unless we are funded by commissioners and they've got deadlines and outcomes that we need to achieve. That actually works better for me, because I want our social enterprise leaders to be able to realise that that's part of our outcome and our outputs, is not just working with people, but this is public funding that we're spending. So my world before construction, I was brought up in a very, very grassrooted community in Bolton named Braithmate. And I lived in a small pocket within Braithmate called Top of Brow. Now, back when we were growing up there, people used to say, if you walk in Top of Brow, you don't walk out alive, which was not true, but it had its moments, and there was a lot.
It had a reputation, did it?
Well, it had, and it still does.
Right.
But back then, however many years ago, it was notorious for gang crime. People didn't use knives then; they used knuckle dusters and burglaries, family within family. There was a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of poverty, a lot of lack of opportunities. At our primary school, we didn't have a school uniform, which you don't realise that's not normal until you grow up and you go, oh, they've all got school uniforms. I remember sending my first daughter to primary school. I'd moved to West Dorton, and I rang my friends up from school and said, they're really posh, they have a school uniform at this school. And they went, Liz, everyone has a school uniform except our school. I went, all right. So yeah, it was that level, and we all saw far too much too early on in our lives, and some families more than others, and our family was one of them families. And
so just on that then, Liz, when you get a job in construction, and you find yourself being valued, do you take a kind of a stigma from where you're from into your life in work?
So in that industry on site, we never really got into conversations, because it was, a matter of a meeting with the project manager or on targets, etc. And we did what we had to do. But when there was back then, you could have social events and you had a budget for social events. So I'd take clients to the rugby or go-karting or a rugby event, and them budgets don't exist anymore. But I remember a couple of times taking the top 10 clients to, usually I was always the only female, but that didn't seem to matter. And we got into conversations around the table, conversations you don't have on site. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, tell us a bit more about yourself. And that's when I would say, I'm originally from Braithmate, and then change. She's from Braithmate.
And that wasn't you thinking that was happening, you saw that?
I saw that, and then the comments would be, I didn't know you're from Braithmate, what's your wallet?
Oh, really?
And it was in that moment I thought, I wasn't prepared to answer them sort of comments and feedbacks, and found it quite hurtful, as an individual. Never stole anything. I'm telling a lie, actually. I did steal a lipstick off Bolton Market once because I wanted a red lipstick and I didn't have any money. But apart from that, I'd never burgled or robbed anybody or anything like that.
So you confessed to that anyway, so that doesn't matter.
So when these people were saying, what's your wallet, what's your bag, I suddenly felt like a victim of my own upbringing, that I had no choice in the matter. So I found, to protect myself, when those conversations happened, I started to lie where I came from, and I'd start to say, oh, I'm from Bolton, or near Bury. And in my head, I wasn't telling lies, because Brightmate is on Bury Road, part of it. So I'd started to create this narrative that I was telling the truth, but not really telling the truth. So, 13 years in the industry, and although I had done well, I bought a house, which was rare in my family. I had a company car. There were certain issues within my own family and the environment I was brought up in, where I was going to far too many funerals. I was going to far too many calls about family members that were going to prison still. Children that I'd seen born were being hooked onto drugs. And it was just the generational trauma that I'd been witness to myself was continuing to happen. And it really started to play my conscience that I'd got away from that, and I knew too much about street life and the effects of intergenerational trauma, and I'd learnt enough about business that if I was to combine both my business skills into the communities of which are being underserved, then I could help to create micro business models that serve the community and help them to become employed.
Wow.
So
I mean, that is a big vision, isn't it? And I guess, so just taking you to that point, you're 13 years in the construction industry. You have this, I suppose, concern about the perception of you and the roots that you come from. You have a drive, clearly. You're successful. We've just set the scene. You've bought your house. You've got a company vehicle. There's not much more that you could potentially want for. Secure career, everything in place, but there's something in you that's making you want to do something differently.
Yeah. It got to a point where, I suppose part of growing up, I realised I was making rich people richer, which is fine, but it's not when you've got lives pulling me that I ain't even getting the opportunities to have an education, never mind a silver spoon in the mouth, or anything, no spoon in the mouth. They have to find a spoon. So when I realised that, I'm never going to set up my own construction company, that was never as part of my vision, but I knew I could have continued to go up the ladder higher and higher. But when I realised that I probably achieved what I wanted to achieve in the construction industry, and my goal was never to make rich people richer. It was about helping people who haven't had the opportunities to at least have a chance in life.
So this was about opportunities. Opportunities for people within the community that you'd grown up with, but further afield than that as well. Now, if I understand it correctly, this is a regional thing, isn't it, that you're now focused on?
It's a national programme. So Roots and Branches are national now. Okay,
so you've decided that construction, you've done what you wanted to in that industry. You're looking back at the community that you came from. You're seeing that there are opportunities there that will allow you to enable people who haven't had opportunity for themselves to maybe bring themselves out of the situation that they're in at the moment. So tell me about what you decided to do at that point then.
Yeah, so despite family members and friends, saying you're mad if you quit your job, and they were right, but it wasn't something that I just felt I had to do. It was something that I could see 20 years down the line as being what I was seeing, and like the vision that I had was so much bigger than me, and the social enterprise sector didn't even exist. So when I did decide to quit my job and set up the Roots project, which is now 15 years old, I didn't know the social enterprise exists, but what I did know is when I felt that shift inside, what I was going to build was far bigger than I could ever imagine. So there was a lot of trust in my faith that I'd found. and being led by Faith and not by Liz, because if it was up to me, then I probably wouldn't be here talking about it now. It'd have been up and failed.
Do you know what that reminds me of?
What?
It reminds me a little bit of what you'd said about being set targets.
Yeah.
So what you'd been set targets, and when those targets were set for you, you were on it.
Yeah.
And in this case, what you got is the responsibility of Faith.
Responsibility to my Faith was, it wasn't an option for me to sit and do nothing with it. It was an option of, I'm going to sacrifice so much to do this, but I know the rewards are going to be greater than I can imagine. Not financially, not just financially, but in helping people to take control of their lives. Ultimately, the outcomes would be bigger of the mental lives we would save. And that, you can't put a price on that. So when I decided to quit my job, I literally gave myself 6 months to be able to campaign what the Roots Project was, and it was basically to re-educate families within our grassroots communities with the social and emotional skills that they may have never had the opportunity to have learned growing up, or if they had learnt them, to re-educate them. And by doing that, it was helping them to take back control of their lives. So it wasn't rocket science, but it had never been done. So I gave us 6 months, and I called that our beans on toast time, because I literally said in 6 months' time, I've got to pull a wage in from this.
If we're still eating beans on toast in 6 months' time.
Yeah, there's my vision's not worked, but I totally felt that I had to have that 6 months to keep knocking on doors with a model that had never been done before. There was one housing association that I kept knocking on the door, because one of their estates in West Orton, the Pungle estate, was hitting the press nationally for lots and lots of negative reasons, for violence, knife crime, gun crime, drugs. And basically what happened on that, it was only a small estate, but families who had been evicted from council housing across the northwest and had nowhere to go were being rehoused on this pocket estate. So we could have drug dealer from Liverpool and drug dealer from Salford, drug dealer from wherever, and all on this one estate.
So a melting pot.
It was a volcano of eruption on a daily basis.
Do you think it was about containment, that they put all those people?
There had to be somewhere.
Okay.
And I can see that they wanted to house these people, but all the issues came, put them in a very tiny pocket, and they all can't fit in.
It's a powder
as well,
keg,
with
isn't it?
all the egos that go with it, and all the negative behaviours that they're related to outside the community was now swamping this estate. So they were fighting for pecking orders. It was a major pecking order.
It's a territory, isn't it? Ultimately.
Massive territory. So we saw this negative press, and I think I'd banged on the housing provider at the time, Contour Housing, with my idea of the Roots Project, remodelling social and emotional behaviour with residents. And
so just tell me about that, Liz. Tell
Yeah.
me about that. So you've got this idea.
Mm-hmm.
You called it the Roots Project, or
Yeah.
was it Roots and Branches at that time?
It was actually called the Personal and Community Development Company, which is a mouthful, but that's what we was set out to do, personal and community development. Well, through the engagement process, I asked the young people on the estate, as part of an engagement with them, because it took a long time to build trust.
And what estate was that, Liz?
It was the Pungle estate.
It was
It's
on
the
that
video,
estate.
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to create a street name for the project. So I asked some of the youth leaders on the street. I met 4 volunteers to start with. We need a street name for this project. I know you don't believe in us yet, but this is what we want to do. So we had a competition, and they drew a logo, and someone called it the Roots Project, and they won a £25 voucher at the time. And that's where the Roots Project came from, a young person on this estate
Fantastic.
who had never been given opportunity to design a logo. And that was the breakthrough of the young people on the estate. Oh, they really have given us an opportunity to do this. No, the plaque's on the wall of the community house. But
So it's buy-in, isn't it, that you've
Yeah.
bought? by doing that, by actually involving the people in that vision at Square One?
It was all about the residents co-designing the project. The social and emotional delivery programs that we did wasn't the hook, because no one's going to say, I don't know you, you're from the council, you're from the social services, you're going to take our kids away, why would I come on your social and emotional development course? That was something that we transitioned them onto once we built relationships. It took me 3 years knocking on Contour's doors, and I'll be honest, they even said it was only because the negative press was causing us so much money as a housing provider. What could we lose by giving you a house on this estate?
Yes.
So
tell me about that then. So you actually set up a headquarters on the estate itself.
Yeah. So they gave us a 3-bedroomed house, and we wanted to have that as a safe place, as a bit like a gatekeeper for residents in between the housing association, the local authority, all the services that were involved in the estate. We would be that gatekeeper. So for us we wanted to target the adults, but the adults were more reluctant to engage with us, but the young people were more visibly on the streets. So as we started to work with the young people, within about 2 years, we had parents who would go, oh right, you're doing that at the community house, let's go and have a look. Or we'd put on events where we'd invite the parents to come and watch the young people in a little play, or a drug abuse project that we'd run. So there was a method in my madness, but to really reach the root cause of what was going on, we wanted to help parents and families to re-educate in this social and emotional, so they could start to take responsibility of their own lives and that within their community. So it took about 2 years of labour-intensive work, of which funders haven't seen the work, but we had a pilot project to evidence. And once we started to engage families and started to look at the strengths within our community, in that community, we would start to educate them in how to have solutions. So, for example, the nearest bus route on the estate was a mile away. So there was a lot of residents who were on benefits spending money on taxis, and the taxi firms were having a field day with people who were on benefits. So we could help a resident set up a community taxi firm, and it was a set fee to certain places. And then a laundrette, because we identified some families didn't have school uniforms, or our children were going to school in dirty clothes. So one of the residents we helped them to set up a little laundrette, a preschool, a youth group, and I think we had about 12 different micro projects on that estate by year 4.
So just on that subject then, okay, so you have decided that this is your calling. You've decided that you're going to set this thing up. You know who it's going to benefit. You know it's going to benefit people in communities similar to the community that you grew up in. You've taken all of those skills that you'd learned in construction.
Yeah.
You'd taken all of that confidence that you'd built, every achievement that you'd experienced in construction, and said, right, I'm going to now apply this, and I'm going to combine it with my faith to deliver a vision that I've got that I know is going to take a long time to put together.
Yeah.
What I've also done is I've gone, where is the most challenged place that I can find at the moment? And what you then did is you ran to it.
Yeah.
There's a saying, run to the fire.
Yeah.
And if you can run to the fire, then you're a much braver person who can address the issues there than someone who runs away from the fire and looks at it from distance. You've talked about understanding what goes on in a community. The fact that you had a house in that community, the fact that you had 12 micro projects, all understanding the challenges within that community, leads us to the name, really, doesn't it?
Yes, getting to the root cause of the problem. And those 12 micro projects, individually and collectively, were taking back control and ownership of the issues lying within their community. And once we started to have those leaders coming forward, then we started the social and emotional development programs. They wouldn't necessarily stay in that micro project role. That was a very step change into the potential that they had. So we had one lady. There's lots of scenarios from that estate. There was one lady who her husband was in prison. He'd burgled more or less all the houses on the estate, and there was a stigma because the residents didn't like her because of her husband, but actually she had lots of potential, and she's now left with 2 children while her husband's in prison. So to engage with her and then over time help her build relationships within the community, say like, this is the boundary line, like she didn't burgle your house and wasn't aware of that, but then helping her transition back into a local community college. Before that, we brought the college to the community. So all the services that were available out in the town centre, we started to negotiate of how they could deliver those into the community as part of a transition process. And that woman's now a surveyor working in a city centre Manchester surveying practice, you like. So we're still seeing the outcomes from that pilot project. What happened after that? The housing association saw the financial benefit and the social return on their benefit by having a Roots project. So as the project was getting, the narrative was changing about this estate, it was becoming a place where people wanted to live. So people were paying rent. They were taking responsibility of paying rent to keep a secure house over the children's head. They were void properties that were now no void properties. Now the housing association have got a waiting list of people who want to move in onto this estate. We were never going to have an end date for that project, but it was all around leaving when the community had taken enough control to carry it themselves. So when the housing association saw the financial return on this investment, it was like, well, we've not got as much police bills, we've not got domestic violence bills, we've not got smashed windows bills, we've got people paying rent. Can we replicate this model in another one of our estates? So we moved over to the St Mary's estate in Oldham. And it took about 5 years to replicate this project. Different estates, same social and emotional model, different engagement process. So developing that team, I think we had about 25 volunteers, 4 paid staff by this point, and 25 volunteers. I always knew that the call that I'd been given was never about me running around the country delivering this project. It was always about creating a project that I knew that worked, that didn't cost the earth, but had the biggest of impacts. So as the reputation was caught by local government, then central government, and then funders, it was a matter of who can I speak to get this project replicated across the country, so all these social community leaders can pick up the Roots project model and say, we can deliver this ourselves, call it whatever you want. So that happened.
It's almost like franchising it, isn't it, really? Creating that model and replicating
it. Yes. So there was it was about 5 years in, and by now I had been doing quite a lot of talks in central government, some funders that had supported us, some of the contractors within the construction industry who had good relationships with. They were the first part of our sustainability model. So we started off with no money. It will take us, there's not much pre-start funding out there, and I didn't want to rely on funding anyway, but as any new startup, there's a time where you need funds just to get you going. But because I built these relationships within construction, and some of them, even though they thought it was mad, what I wanted to do, they believed that I could do it. So there was 5 construction companies who all invested what they could in the first 2 years of the Roots project. And some of them are still with us 15 years later. But the benefits to them was they got in places they could never get. The housing conference, doing a presentation with the housing conference. They got involved with housing associations we were working with. They can't get on the framework of suppliers. There were benefits all round, not just what they did for us, it was what we was doing for them in terms of slashing their marketing budget. Sorry, I know you're a marketing company. But building those relationships that I still have with now. You know, if we run a project in Silo, I could ring them up and say, could you provide, like the National Social Enterprise Day event, would you be interested in providing some support for this? Does it work for you? Once I started to attend some more central government meetings and started to spread the word of the Roots Project, there was a minister at the time who said, can you come to my office, the Department for Communities? And I said, yeah. So I was like, in this room, there's Houses of Parliament, number 10 Downing Street Garden at back of me. And I looked and thought, how on earth have I got here? I'm the little Liz from Topper Brow, and I'm sat with number 10 Downing Street Gardens at the back of me. And at that moment, I thought, this is where our opportunity now to be able to get people to buy in and replicating this model, which is easy, doesn't cost a lot, but has massive life-saving outcomes. So he said, how do we replicate this project?
So what we've got is an established social enterprise, effectively, after 5 or 6 years where you've had the Roots project and you've got it really working on that estate to the point where it's a proof of concept, and where you've got that particular council saying, let's try that now again over here and over here and over here. And so you replicate it. And the idea is that in replicating it, you can prove that this can be delivered by others on your behalf. So you've got this vision now of this being something that can be positive outcomes all the way across the region, across the country.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And as a result of the work that you've done, you then find yourself in 10 Downing Street, am I right? Or in
Department of Communities, which is... There was a couple of quite moments. There was one where I was in the Department of Communities with the Minister of the Big Society Capital. And then there was another meeting I was in with Nick Hurd, who was the Minister of Civil Society, and his office was backed onto number 10 Downing Street Gardens. And it was in both them meetings, I'm thinking, how on earth am I sat in this meeting? I'm just like, and then I realised that it was through my faith I was in that room. That was a bit of a... I didn't want to be in that room because I was there with all those people. I felt like my faith had got me there because I could have knocked on their doors and said, Mr. Minister of Civil Society, can I come and see you in your office? It was an act of faith that got me there. And then I was sat with people from like the Chief Exec of Royal Bank of Scotland, like how do we implement funding through our charity, our commercial banking, our community banking to support people who are setting up projects in the estates, like talk us through it. And I'm thinking, but this is where other layers of
we can do this again. So
it was other layers of exploitation of social entrepreneurs started to arise in me. So what I did identify in one of these meetings is they was talking about money, etc., and they were saying how much this costs and how much it would cost them, and then it dawned on me how many people in that room was being paid and how many weren't. So I asked the question. Look, I'd built up my confidence skills by then, and I said, in terms of how this is going to be funded, I said the social leaders who you're working with need to be identified as a paid role, because the projects are sustainable, and unless that social leader is setting the path of sustainability, your funding can last 2 years, then you've got to start again. And I said, just to have an example, I said, if you put your hand up in here, if you're being paid to be here now, and they all put their hand up except me.
That's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, I said, this is what I've come from Bolton to London. You've paid for my train ticket, which I'm really grateful for, but this is a day out of my diary that I'm not getting paid for. Yet I'm going back doing the same results within the project. That was a bit of a deal breaker then, because there was like, oh, how do we pay these people?
That's okay. So let me just nutshell that as well. So because there's a couple of things there that I want you to talk around. And if we take you back to that point where you've been invited to this particular meeting, let's say, and I know there was a number of them around that time, but you're in this meeting, you've got the captains of industry, let's call them, that are around you and around that table, and you've been invited there because of the work that you've done to that point. The first thing I wanted to ask you about was, you mentioned little Liz from the estate. Well, everybody pulls the keks on one leg after the other, don't they? The same as you. And I guess because of what you believed in so strongly, you were confident enough in your ability in that room. How did that feel when you came out of that meeting, having changed things in their mind? From an imposter syndrome point of view, that must have given you a lot of confidence.
When I came out of that room, I thought I would feel something, but what it did was highlight to me just how misunderstood community leaders are.
Wow.
I didn't feel like I'd achieved anything. What I felt probably, if anything, was more frustration.
Right.
On the lack of awareness of the potential in our communities and the people that can create that movement, but how they're expected to do it as on a community and voluntary role, then who pays their bills? And this isn't about how much people get paid. This is just about equal opportunities, and that anyone that's creating public service outcomes should be paid, or in a transition to be paid. One of the things that I spent time talking to both the Big Society Capital leader and the Minister of Civil Society is, the best route to this is find your key leaders within the community, and that might be your local drug dealer. He's got the biggest pull in turning that community around.
It's an incredible way of thinking.
If we move on to the estate, we go for the drug dealer. And if it takes me 2 months or 6 months to build a relationship with him until he knows that power and control he has over the community can be used for something else as well. Might never happen, but if we don't get them, then we'll go for the one underneath and the one underneath until we get someone who go, I didn't want to do this anyway. Actually, this is all I know. This is what my family's always done. So to create
an alternative for them.
Yeah, it's about, for us, it's about breaking that intergenerational trauma and abuse. So if you send a housing association direct and they're not building that trust, now there's some really good community workers out there, but there's some that just post a letter through the letterbox and that's their community engagement. We're going behind the door. We're building relationships. We're looking at, we can see the safeguarding problems here and we're going to address it appropriately, but we're not going away. We're going to talk you through it. We're going to walk you through it.
Yeah.
And by that process, we start to learn about the strengths of that individual.
Yeah.
I've always played netball. Have you thought about setting a netball? It's as simple as that. But without the relationship, there is no netball team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without the relationship, there's no laundrette. But it's that relationship bit that is the sweet spot of the success of the Roots project and other projects out there. So for us to work with as many community leaders or social entrepreneurs as possible with the lived experience is twofold. We've got to work with them taking ownership of their own leadership skills and the boundaries within their community project. And there's two pieces of work there. We want to work and develop strong community leaders, regardless of the background. Obviously, there's anything to do with sexual abuse like that we can't touch and won't touch. But we've had prolific criminals who have come to us and saying, you know, I want to set this project up, but who will touch me because of this? Like, well, we will. We believe that you've got a skill that can be used for the greater good. Let's talk about your prison life. So finding that untapped potential was basically when we worked with the Big Society minister at the time. He says, how do we roll this out? How do we make it accessible in all our communities? And it was renamed and redelivered into Hidden Talent.
Okay.
So
when would that have been, Liz? When
it was around 2015. Yeah, 2015.
Okay, so some 8 years ago now.
Yeah, which in what happened was I'd made myself redundant from my own project, but that's what I wanted to achieve. And I kind of had a bit of a wow moment when I had community leaders a couple of Greater Manchester leaders ring me up and try to sell me the Roots project. And that made me smile.
Yeah.
That wasn't me going, that's mine, because I didn't build it for it to be mine. I built it to replicate and save as many lives as possible. So I quite happily just said, I'm not in a position to buy it at the moment. I'm not in a position to work with it at the moment, but good luck. And that for me was the best smile, inside smile I could have. So by making myself redundant, allowed me to start working as a consultant for public services, looking at reforming public services, looking at developing the social enterprise infrastructure. That means working with funders and getting the money to our communities by creating those infrastructures. And then it was 2019, I felt like we'd grown some branches in terms of the Roots project, so I remodelled the business as Roots and Branches. So now we are that leadership training provider, and we work specifically with social entrepreneurs with lived experience. We've got a passion of working with people who are neurodiverse through the criminal justice sector, faith sector. You know, our churches are full of people with potential, and they can do so much within their church, but those skills can be delivered directly into the community. So the momentum is there now, where people will get into contact with us, and through our network of cooperatives, social enterprises, there's a lot of support out there now. So the stronger the leaders work in our communities, our job is to safeguard them.
That's fantastic. So if I now think about Liz Douglas, I don't think of Liz Douglas in the way that I did when you first walked into the room. I know or knew of you, Liz, that you were part of a social enterprise network, that you were keen to engage with all of the other parts of that social enterprise network for good within communities. But now what I know is it's a much deeper understanding. This is someone who has a huge amount of commercial acumen and experience in sales and business development from the construction world. With that comes a strong character, one that is confident in her own abilities and focused,
Thanks.
who likes to achieve when is set targets, and her faith now targets her to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
From that that construction background, you then took that into something that was a real passion piece for you, that was about how you'd grown up, what you'd experienced growing up, how that community needed a helping hand to empower themselves, and you were there to do that, and you had a vision to do that. You then spent time building a proof of concept, which was the Roots project. And that Roots project has been replicated now, and what you've been able to do is almost set that to one side and let it have a life of its own.
Yeah.
You've experienced it come back at you now, which is a wonderful thing, to actually be independent of it, but then be approached by it, which is wonderful. But now your vision is to take all of that experience and start to empower other social entrepreneurs to be able to deliver that same community wealth building. So with that in mind, we're now kind of more or less up to speed, and you can take us forward now with what your vision is as a consultant with track record and experience and connections and networks. Tell me about what your vision is now.
So the Roots and Branches vision now is to be part of the process of reforming public services. And what I mean by that is educating as many public service professionals as possible of the barriers to social enterprise, particularly with a lived experience. And the other is to work with as many social entrepreneurs with lived experience and help them to become sustainable leaders. By experience myself, like, even though I had some business skills, I still had a lot of social and emotional barriers. I still got absorbed in the work that I do. I still got swept away by all these different scenarios in the community. That isn't safe, as it's not a safe place to be for a social entrepreneur for longevity. And we're human beings, and coming from a lived experience, people are naturally feeling other people's feelings. However, that cannot be sustainable. So it doesn't matter how much money that social entrepreneur is being paid if there's no boundaries in terms of the emotional health or the social health, particularly if they work and live on the same community. That for me is unsafe for a community leader. And I made that mistake. I fell in those pits and I struggled getting out of them, but I did get out of them. However, some people don't have the skills to get out. So a lot of social leaders have become a statistic of their own program.
Yeah.
So what we're finding is by putting one of our programs in place at the very early doors called Steps to Sustainability, we're working on those boundaries from day one. And those boundaries can be around emotional health, it can be around time boundaries, it can be around project development boundaries, it could be around project management skills. So there's about 15 workshops that we can apply, and we want to continue delivering those workshops to our social enterprise leaders through the different funding programs that's offering social enterprise support. So we might have worked with about 2,000 social enterprise leaders since 2009, and we have seen the patterns of people saying, I'm burnt out. Well, anyone in business can burn out, but when you're carrying other people's emotions into your body, that becomes you're housing their emotions, then you're going home. It's affecting people's families, it's affecting people's relationships. People are becoming overworked, overburdened. And
so am I right in saying then to anyone who doesn't understand the phrase lived experience, what we're talking about here is someone who, because of their own life, has experienced something that then informs them about how something could be done better. So it's learning from that lived experience and then deciding, I want to make a difference, which is what you did. But what you've now got to is a point at which you're saying, it's not healthy to sustain that for any length of time. Here is a set of guidelines for anyone in that role as to how to manage that without being pulled into the emotional aspects of it that you think and that you know are unsustainable.
Yeah, and with coming from a lived experience, examples could be, someone who's been a victim of FGM. And they were set up an FGM project, which is
what's FGM?
Female genital
mutilation. Okay. Yeah.
So, and they want to set up a project which is going to protect other people, but they're reliving that experience.
Yes.
Back, right. So how do we safeguard that leader from reliving that trauma when she goes to bed at night?
Yeah.
When she's done her bit and she's ticked the funding boxes, she's going to bed reliving every night. And people might say, well, I had one person say, well, they should have dealt with the trauma by then. Trauma doesn't go away when you're talking about it all the time. Other projects can be knife crime. A mum who's sadly lost a son, she wanted to set up a knife crime awareness. Now she's constantly talking about her son's death. How are we safeguarding these leaders who have got such a massive impact but are going to bed at night crying their eyes out and usually not getting paid? So passion can be of a great purpose if they are kept safe. If they're not kept safe, we're adding to the statistics of what we're trying to avoid. So the pandemic had a massive impact on our social entrepreneurs. Some of them were just maybe getting sustainable, but then the rug was pulled from underneath their feet and can't get back on track. They might have suffered their own mental health issues. They might have gone back. So family members that have died. There's so many people out there have lost their voice because of the pandemic, particularly in the social enterprise world. However, there are some people who set up in the pandemic because they saw a need within their community, and not working, it gave them time to set up. So there are a lot of people operating social entrepreneurs out there who do have boundaries, but through experience we seeing far too many social entrepreneurs who are suffering as well as delivering their social enterprise. And unless we create that safe space for them to say, I am struggling, we are potentially creating a bigger monster.
So that's fantastic, because I guess with any social entrepreneur, what you've got is the passion that drives them, but not necessarily the commercial thinking that will allow them to sustain themselves because of the emotional tie that they've got within that cause. Let's call it a cause.
Yeah.
So someone is fighting for a cause. They're doing it as an unpaid volunteer in that cause to start with, and are finding themselves without the necessary skills potentially or experience to know how to manage it. So that's what Steps for Sustainability or Steps to Sustainability.
Steps to Sustainability, yeah. It's a bit of a mouthful, so we're going to downsize it to steps.
S to S.
S to S, yeah. And the other productive way that we feel we can reach both the professionals within the public sector and our residents who are taking ownership is via a book that I've written, and it's called Watch Your Bag.
Okay, so now we've got everything that you've done so far, which is just an absolute, it's a library of experience that you've got, Liz. And now, as well as the consultancy piece to support these social entrepreneurs, you've also, and it's not just one book. You're actually halfway through your second one, aren't you? But tell us about your first book then.
So, the first book is Watch Your Bag, and that book is about the reality of social entrepreneurs with lived experience. It does include my own experience, and it includes those stereotypical comments of people from grassroots communities like myself.
Yeah.
It includes those barriers that why people won't trust public services or the housing association, why people are sitting on the talent and not doing anything with it. It talks about intergenerational trauma that unless we step in will continue to happen, and the taboo topics that aren't spoken about within our communities are spoken about in my book.
Wow. I mean all of that. When I think about all of that, for those that are trying to deliver within a social setting to make a difference, with everything that you've said about the emotional challenges that are brought about, to be able to read someone's experience and success in handling all of these things, especially when you've got your own lived experience, that's a lot of value that book's adding.
Well, people are asking me, who's the book for? And I really like to think about this because it's for everyone who's involved in making a social difference. Whether you're working for a public service, working for as a public professional, or you're in your community and you've always wanted to do something, or you're even interested, you can sit on your bus or in your taxi or in your Uber or whatever and have a read out from a professional, the perspective of a lived experience social entrepreneur. And as a social entrepreneur, you can read the perspective of the public professional, why they don't get it. Like, it's not necessarily someone's fault. They don't know.
I mean, you put that beautifully, absolutely beautifully. It's different perspectives all smashed together into one piece from the perspective of someone who's experienced it all. Yeah,
on both sides. And we've still got a lot of work to do. And I feel like the second book, which is all around the social justice within social entrepreneurs and lived experience, I feel like I can't finish that until my first book is out. So Watch Your Bag is one of our big goals for this year, and we want that book to be read by as many professionals within public services, housing associations and our communities as possible. The more people read it, hopefully there's more education around social enterprise sector, and that we're not a voluntary sector. We can get a wage, we can make money, we can make as much money as we want. What we do with our profit is the difference. So if we are reinvesting any profit from a social enterprise back into the community, then that is us being a social enterprise. We're creating more opportunities for people to come forward and set up a micro business in their community.
It's fantastic.
So the book is for everyone that has a social conscience or wants to have any kind of social purpose and wants to learn about those layers that you can never learn because you don't have the lived experience.
And it's how to handle those layers, isn't it? Like you say, if you've got assumptions being made from a government point of view,
yeah,
and you're aware of those assumptions that are being made, then you can navigate them. you can know how to deal with them and handle them, be them objections or barriers or whatever they might be. And I think that's the theme of the book, is it not? Or the title of the book is because of that theme.
Yeah.
What we've got is this assumption about people. We've got assumptions being made all over the place, stigmas, stereotypes, and so on. And what you're saying is that you were worried, weren't you, that from your background, whenever you said where you were from, people say, "Oh, watch your bag."
Mm-hmm. Watch your bag. Now, the first thing I say is, when people ask me who you are and where you come from, I say, I'm Liz Douglas. I'm from Top of Bow, Bright mate, and I won't be nicking you back. So we have to flip the narrative at some point,
Yeah.
but there's a process in between where people haven't getting to get confident enough to be judged and how to respond, because people are always going to be stereotypical. We can only educate both sides if both sides want to change that culture, and we're about changing that culture.
Wow. I think it's fantastic. And so, when's this book going to be out? Because I want to read it.
Hoping May, yeah. So we're looking at a publisher at the moment who, we've got a bit of a sponsor so we can get the book out there, and then hopefully to take it on a bit of a tour with local authorities and housing associations, do some mini book clubs, get it into all our communities, existing communities, and programs that we deliver within our communities. I'd like it to be a free resource for our community leaders so they can pick it up and feel like it's coming from someone who's gone through a lot of the judgmental processes that they're going through, but as equally into as many local authorities, departments and funders and social investors who, without having to go out and try and learn, they can hopefully read from real life experiences.
I think it's fantastic. And I really wish you well with it. I don't think you're going to need much luck. I think the experience that you've got, you're a very clear thinker. You've got a very strong vision of where you want this to go. It adds up from a commercial point of view.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sustainable model. It's got proof in years of delivery. I'm sure there are probably hundreds of people that you could ask for a testimonial from their own point of view. The lady who,
Yep.
Was struggling in that community among many. So I just wish you all the very best with it.
And just to add, any profits from the Buzz book will be going straight back into the social enterprise, which will help more community micro projects to set up.
Fantastic.
So buy the book.
That's tremendous. Thank you for telling me everything about your experiences. I think it's incredible. We'd love to support you and to be able to make sure that book flies off the shelves, or the virtual shelves at the least, depending on how you sell it.
Yes.
But thanks for coming in, Liz, and telling us everything about it.
Thank you, Stuart.